name is Jordan Farmer. This is Uncommon Conversations, and my guest today is Jay Scott. I'll let him introduce himself to you guys, but we're going to be talking about a lot of cool things. Cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, blockchain, as well as lobbying and a few other really interesting topics. I know you're going to enjoy it. Please stay tuned. And here he is. Hello, sir.
Hey, what's going on, man? How's it going, Jordan?
It's going good, man. It's going good. I had a good day at work today. It was 104 degrees. And signal's lost for a second. Let's see if we have him come back real quick. Can you hear me? Oh no. My connection? No, I think my connection's good. Well, he'll be back. Hang tight, guys. All right.
Sorry about that, man. I'm not sure what's going on. I think because I have like multiple Instagram accounts on my phone right now, it's getting all confused right now. So sorry about that. But you can hear me now, right?
Yeah, I can hear you now, and it's stable. Whatever the issue was, it seems to be resolved now. So I'm glad we can do it. Anyways, I've had a good day. Was 104 degrees here in Oklahoma, and I work in a building, but with open doors, and we're doing physical work. I'm a car detailer, an official real deal detailer now. So I worked for Hertz Rental Car, preparing cars for them. So that wasn't quite full detailing, but anyways, so it was a good day at work. It was hot, it was intense, but it was a satisfying day. And now I get to talk to you. So I'm really excited. Anyway, so without any further ado, Mr. J, please introduce yourself to us, tell us a bit about your background, and then we'll get into the subjects we're going to discuss today.
Perfect. Well, first of all, thanks so much for having me on, Jordan, because, what you're doing, I think, is really important. Bringing different people together to, just kind of show the world that, we all have a lot more in common than we actually realize. Even if our political backgrounds might seem slightly different off top. But as far as my background goes, I was born in Jamaica, raised in Turks and Caicos, so I'm actually an immigrant to America, came in 2007 to go to the University of Miami, go Canes. And, since then, I've been living over here in Miami. And at university, I studied economics with a minor in finance. And during that time, I had the opportunity to do an exchange program over in Washington, D.C., where I actually went to Georgetown for a semester and had the opportunity to intern for the National Petrochemical and Refiners Association, which is actually the lobbyist organization for the oil companies. So that was a pretty interesting experience, opened my eyes to, like the way politics work. So, it was it was a pretty informative experience. And since then, I've been working in different jobs, mostly in education and finance, and now work in recruiting. So, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. But more recently, I've actually also founded a blog, which is, one of the main reasons you and I connected, because the goal of my blog is actually pretty closely aligned with the same thing you're doing. I'm doing my best to kind of show people that, people in general have a lot more in common, than we realize. And I think, in my opinion, a lot of people focus way too much on labels, whether it's libertarian, progressive, conservative, liberal, whatever, the labels are. A lot of people want to kind of adopt a label and then take all the positions that match up with whatever positions are supposed to go with that label. And I've seen my political opinions evolve, throughout my life. I'm someone who's always open to new information. So, Growing up, my mom was a really big, Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton supporter. Even though I grew up in Turks and Caicos, my mom was an American citizen, lived here for a very long time. So I've always kind of kept up with politics. And then, like as time went on and I got to know how politics works, a little bit more and more, my opinion on that, did wind up evolving. I still would say I lean to the left, on a lot of economic issues. But as far as, some of the, social issues go, I would definitely say I'm more center right, like on a few of those. So depending on what topics, like you're talking about, I can be anywhere, from the left to the right. It all kind of depends, what it is, you're talking about. And, one great thing about having a little bit of that, like international, like experience is that I also realized that conservative and liberal mean completely different things depending on which country you're in, because there are some policies that would be considered that would be considered liberal over here that are really just considered, the norm, like in other places. So yeah, that's a little bit about my background and, how I got to where I am. And
Right, right on. I got a curveball for you.
Sure.
What, if any, had a religious background were you raised under, or do you come from?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I was raised as technically an Anglican, but I think, which is a form of Protestantism, but the real reason I kind of went to church was just because Turks and Caicos is like a really, religious country, like that we're supposed, like that's kind of what everyone says. So like my mom, I don't know how much she really actually like, believes it, but it's like, you go through the motions, and then you do that. So, I went to Sunday school, I went to Bible study on Tuesdays, went to church, all that fun stuff. And then when I got to college, I actually took a philosophy class that had challenged on some of my opinions. And I don't like being wrong. And, the way he questioned me and kind of like broke down my beliefs, like, in front of the class, I kind of felt like I was wrong that day. So, like I did a little bit of like searching and digging and questioned some things. So after that, I would say for a little bit, I would have described myself as an atheist. But then I kind of thought about that a little bit more and I realized, well, science can't really explain everything, like at this point. And in my opinion, there is definitely something, outside of this strictly physical world that we live in. So I don't really put like a definition on it now, but I would definitely say I believe in God. I would just describe God as like a higher power, which would be like unified consciousness. So I believe all consciousness, people, and living beings are kind of connected in one way, shape, or form. And we all collectively make up the concept of God. So I would say God is, all powerful, and then love is the most powerful force in the universe. But I know a lot of people kind of tie those two concepts together. I would say it all depends on where we take it. I think at its root, consciousness wants to be, all loving and all powerful. That's why it's the most powerful force in the universe. But it really depends on what we do, collectively while we're here. That kind of decides, the way the world goes. But that's my opinion. So
Nice, nice. I like that. That was a great answer. Yeah, I definitely had a somewhat similar background. My grandfather's a pastor, was raised in the church, was a true believer. We weren't just necessarily going through the motions. I was one of the few kids that was actually there listening to the sermons, wanting to like telling the people to shut up so I could hear it, kind of a thing. I was that nerd, but and then I was an atheist for a number of years. When I was 17, 18, started questioning things and had to go from a childish to an adult perspective with it all. And then around 24, was able to find a way to, within an intellectual framework, through the work of Jordan Peterson, come to understand where a God might sit in this world. And it's funny because it brought me around to certain points that I had originally claimed when I was a believer. And that was just that within a materialist scientific framework, you can't explain things that are by definition outside the system.
Hmm.
And so it's sort of a thing where you to say, and I've had people say, I'm only going to believe in what I can be shown evidence for, what you can basically do a double-blind, placebo-controlled study to
Hmm.
verify, and that's such a limited concept of the world, and it only taps into sort of establishing facts and data points, but it doesn't give you any framework to interpret that, and it doesn't speak to the nature of a being, especially a conscious being that has to contend with moral reality. And so there's a whole different frame we have to go into. Are you
Have
going
you
to say
ever,
something?
yeah, have you ever heard of the double slit experiment?
Yeah, yeah, with where the observation of material reality affects the outcome, and so consciousness is a key component of reality. That definitely is a contributing. It one good thing about certain facts like that is it can at least break up false beliefs. But
Hmm.
it's one thing to break down a false belief. It's another thing to then try to claim something as a central aspect and positive truth in reality, and that's sort of the eternal truths of being is what sort of religion is trying to get at and trying to say in this world of structure that we've been given that we know has certain limitations, we can fly as humans but only within the laws of physics, only through manipulating the universe that exists as it does can we actually move forward. That plays itself into the moral framework. Like there is only going to be a limited set of ultimate truths about how beings are best to interact with other beings
Hmm.
over the longest span of time, and it's an emergent reality within our reality that we exist in, and um, only through the right combination of factors can someone truly tap into that ultimate truth. And it's a journey and a complex discussion, but it's an interesting one. And yeah, there's a lot to go there. I've definitely, over the last 10 years, I was sort of studying the world, so to speak, and trying to figure out, map it out so that I could sort of navigate it myself. And now I'm more focused on trying to seek God and seek truth
Okay.
in regard to my relationship to God. That's going to be, a lifelong thing. These are all lifelong things, but it's going to become the center of my focus for the next 10 years at least.
Yeah.
So,
And
anyhow, but yeah, that's awesome. You have that background. It's really cool. Are you involved in any churches? Do you go to any churches at this point?
so at this point, I don't go to church. Like right now, as far as structured religion goes, I think one of the things that's really good about it is the community. Like that it builds, and the collective energy you get. Like when you walk into a church, and I really do think there is a very large benefit having a collection of people who are all getting together and focus on putting positive energy out there and speaking about life lessons. But I would say the reason why I'm not really part of any church right now is because, to be honest with you, maybe I just haven't found like the right one. Because you know even though I would say I believe in God, I would say as far as the Bible goes, I would say the Bible has a little bit more of a limited interpretation, in my opinion. This is just my opinion of like what it is, and a lot of the like when I want to improve my relationship with God, at this point, there are two main things that I'm doing. Meditating, which is what I consider listening to God, and then praying. I do a lot more meditating than I do praying. So praying is kind of like talking to God, the collective consciousness, and meditating is listening. So I try to do a lot more listening, than I do talking. And for the most part, the talking is really just giving thanks. And because like when some people pray, like I just think it's a little bit arrogant to like ask God for something, because it's like if God has a plan, then what are you gonna say that's gonna make God change his plan? Like, you see what I'm saying? So I think
Yeah,
we're
yeah,
all here to find our purpose, to try and make this world better, and to respect his creation, and to make sure that we're improving it and leaving it better for the people who come after us. So I would say, that's kind of like what I would say I would describe my life, purposes right now. I'm trying to do my best to use social media and a lot of my time to enlightening people to different perspectives and sharing my life experience, some of the things I've seen and experienced, just so we can all kind of come together. So I think it all kind of ties in. If the bigger and positive influence you have on the world, in my opinion, the closer you're getting to God, the closer you are fulfilling your purpose. And like everyone is gonna have, different ways to do that. We're all here to do different things. Some people are here to, spread joy, spread happiness, make people laugh, like all that's important to me, because of my background, I feel like I can contribute to the conversation, when it comes to politics, economics, like that kind of thing too, and also spirituality, which is, a strange combination, but, it's kind of where I'm at.
Uh, I loved all that, and I want to focus first on. We like to think of the world as because we categorize things through language, and that's how we organize and think about the world. But the world isn't separate. It's not like it's individual systems all isolated. It's one giant interlocking, extremely complex system. And so these things are all tied together, and almost visually like the pyramid. There's a conflation or a congregation of things as the world tends to move forward, especially around truth. The truth tends to circle around itself because the world is structured the way that it is. And that's part of the reason why I have my particular philosophical background or worldview, mostly ironically coming from the first word, some of the first words in the Bible. We are all made in the image of God. If God is the creator and divine power is creation, our ability to create as individual bits of consciousness is the image of God laid within us. And in order to allow that to come forth and flourish in the maximum possible way, we need human freedom. We need to allow that individual expression. When you choke off that individual expression, you're literally keeping divine forms from coming forth. It's a genuine crime against humanity, and so it's very valuable.
I was going to say, and censorship is actually one of the topics I'm most passionate about, because that's actually one of my biggest problems, like left right now, because they seem to be really intent on shutting out dissenting opinions. And I've had the honor of having Dr. Peter McCullough on my podcast before, who is one of the leading cardiologists in the country. Before the pandemic, he was respected by absolutely everybody in the medical community, and then he put his entire career on the line to tell the truth and go against the grain, and like tell what he sees to be the truth of what's going on in this COVID-19 pandemic. He created a protocol that was kind of mimicked to help all the politicians, rich people when they got sick with COVID. He kept a lot of people from dying and out of the hospital with that protocol he developed. And unfortunately, he hasn't been given the credit he deserves from the mainstream media. And he, even though we might have the different political leanings, like on one or two different topics, like I'm able to appreciate all the good that he's done for the world. And I could be wrong about my political opinions. He might be right. He might be wrong. Well, we don't know. And that's why
We're all coming from a place of ignorance.
exactly.
Like none of us, the smartest man to ever live with all the facts on his side might have a small, minuscule fraction of the truth of reality. And we just have to have the humility to understand that's where we're all always forever and until the end of time going to come from. And to some extent, through certain mechanisms, we can interact with ultimate intelligence. Maybe AI is a way to bring forth an ultimate intelligence we can communicate with in a tangible way. But even that will only be a fraction and a cheap facsimile of the ultimate truth that created all of this structure.
AI is limited to the inputs, like that we put into it and like what we get to it. And, it can only really take into account the data from this physical world. There's a spiritual aspect that, AI, will never be able to grasp. At least in maybe it's possible. But, not to get too off track, I think censorship is one of the biggest threats, to the world right now. Because without dissenting opinion, we can't do science properly, we can't do politics properly, we can't do anything properly. And yeah, I really think censorship is one of the biggest threats to the world right now. And I've also faced it. I had my Instagram, suspended a few times. Facebook is always shutting down my account. Thankfully, I'm there right now. Hopefully Instagram, doesn't shut me off anymore. But, like the reasons they shut people off, like today they'll say that you're going against the fact checkers, and then a year from now it comes out that all the things they banned you for before are now accepted. In the
It's now the approved truth.
It's now the approved truth. So it's like, why do that in the first place? So we have to get to a point where we trust people to be able to analyze information for themselves and let the best arguments win. If your argument isn't good, you don't need to censor the opposition. All you need to do is put the truth out there and let it fend for itself. So
no one owns the truth. It's a discovery process. And so if you're about discovering the truth, you want conversation. If you're about being right and or keeping people from the truth, then you engage in censorship. There's some weird background feedback on your end. I was able to hear you, but it sounded a bit like R2D2 was cussing you out in the background. But I want to make a quick deviation back to prayer, and then we'll get into some of the censorship and the powers that be and the establishment truth in a second. Sure. When you were talking about prayer, there are two types of prayer that I've seen in the world and I've observed and engaged in. And one of them is what you said, sort of asking for favors from the universe, saying, please, God, bend to my will, give me this Lamborghini that I really, really want. Not, sometimes it's cure this person of a disease. And there is something to asking, having the humility to say, I'm going to ask, even if I don't know if it's going to come to anything. I think we have power in our words. And so when we articulate verbally things, there's something there. But there's a different kind of prayer that takes two forms. One is listening without asking, and then listening after asking. The listening without asking is meditation, just quieting your mind, limiting yourself, and opening yourself up to what can speak to you in the absence of your limited perspective. Then, and that's meditation. The other side of it is when you need help beyond what you can bring yourself, with your inner being. So for me, it's been needing peace, and then more recently asking for the willpower to be able to march forth in the missions that I have. When I'm in true desperation, you can't fake it. You can't rig the system and pretend like you really, really are desperate or really, really are repentant and in need of something beyond you. There's no faking this. But when I have genuinely been in a place where I could not find peace in my own mistakes, my own flawed being, my own sinful nature, and I needed peace that I could not find myself, and I asked for it, like that, the peace was brought to me from the inside through that internal connection with the ultimate source of everything, with source, and that was absolutely real. And then more recently, in a more ceremonial sort of approach to it, asking for willpower and asking for the energy and the concentration and focus to do what I believe I should be doing. Because it's one thing to know what you need to do. It's another thing to be able to do it. Exactly. And I have not been able to, I've never been that super willful person. I've been very much a deferential, agreeable, sort of flexible to the things of the world. And when you're trying to march, you can't do that. You have to create something in yourself. So anyway, so yeah, there's different kinds of prayer, asking and listening, which is that. And that's sort of asking something specific. And then I guess there's sort of three, and then asking, and then just asking for an answer when you're having questions about what you should do, asking for guidance in that sense, and then just listening. And all three are very critical. The shallow wish, the shallow Amazon wish list version of prayer is it's shallow. It's exactly what I just said, and it's not what people should be doing. But you talked about Dr. Peter McCullough, who's a brilliant guy and been totally shut down. Like, he was kept from any mainstream a mainstream impact, mainstream exposure for a long time
Hmm.
until basically Joe Rogan and a few other real big players sort of brought him out in front of people's
Hmm.
eyes. And he's still, for the MSNBC, CNN, Fox News. I'm not so sure about Fox News. I don't know if he's been on there or not, but
Yeah, he's actually Fox News was the only station that had him on multiple times before Joe Rogan, and like I really respect them, for their coverage during the coronavirus pandemic. So I can definitely say I have my problems with some of their coverage on other issues, but as far as the coronavirus pandemic goes, they're the only mainstream news station that has actually presented an alternate side to the argument, and I really respect them for that. And yeah, and Dr. McCullough for putting himself on the line, because before this whole thing, like I've read about his history. He was one of the most prolific cardiologists in the country. He is the most published medical professional on the cardio-renal connection, which is the connection between the heart and the kidneys, which are the two most affected organs in the body by COVID after the lungs. So, in any rational world, he would have been one of the people we turn to get his opinion on this issue, because he's literally the most prolific person on the cardio-renal connection. But in this world where money and profits kind of control our politics and media, he's cast as a crazy right winger. So
yeah.
I don't get it.
Yeah, it's cool that you mentioned money and profits, because those are
Mm-hmm.
two expressions of power, and I often talk about the relationship between power and money because they're
Mm-hmm.
somewhat the same thing and somewhat not the same thing. The right is very conscientious of big government and the dangers of big government. The left is very conscientious of the dangers of big business and the tendencies of big business. The
Mm-hmm.
true enemy of the people is the perverted union of those two forces: money and power, power and money. Power in the sense of tangible, boots on the ground, guns on their thing,
Mm-hmm.
police forces, laws, that sense of power, not just the coercive power of money, which is a thing, and they're two
Mm-hmm.
sides of the same coin. But um, that force and that spirit, so to speak, is definitely at the heart of the censorship, at the heart of masking the truth from people, and wanting to, for selfish and very shallow ends that aren't necessary, because most of these people that are engaging in this could be successful financially just with their own talents, but
Mm-hmm.
they need to take it to the extra step of being an evil dictator, so to speak, in spirit.
Now, if I could jump in really quick, I don't know if you ever heard of a gentleman by the name of Jax Fresco, but he was the person who developed something called the Venus Project. And, one of the things, they talk about is the way that scarcity has kind of shaped human behavior over time. And I don't necessarily blame, all those people you mentioned. We should definitely hold them accountable, for the wrongs that they've done. However, I don't necessarily blame them, because throughout human history, we've always had scarcity. It's only been in like the last couple decades that we've remembered or figured out, depending on how you look at it, how we can automate abundance, and kind of remove a lot. Like if we were to take all the effort that we put into figuring out ways to kill each other and blow each other up, and put that energy into actually creating abundance, then we could have like enough food for everyone. We could have enough space for everyone to live. And, for the most part, we would be able, in my opinion, to like spend our time doing things that we enjoy a little bit more, because the truth is, um, I know a lot of, and I don't know if you'll disagree with me here or not, but I would say there are different things, that motivate people, but the main thing that motivates people is social impact. And that's why money has been put like up on this pedestal, because it's kind of like a measurable way, you're supposed to be showing your social impact. Because when you have a lot of money, what does it mean? It means you're successful. That means you've done a lot of things in the world and you've contributed a lot, and that's why you have all this money. And if you ask anyone who's rich, most of them are gonna say they have this money because they've contributed a lot, and they're very successful. So there are different ways to measure success, and if we were to automate abundance, I think there would be other ways, that we could measure that success. And overall, like there's a lot, that can be done. And that's why, I would definitely recommend, your viewers check out this book. It was the same one, I mentioned to you, called Blockchain Revolution, by Don Tapscott, and getting the world's resources on a public ledger, so everyone can kind of see what the world has and what the world doesn't have. I think is like, a very big first step, because that's how a lot of corruption starts. But sorry, I know I got a little sidetracked there, but
No, you're good.
yeah.
No, I appreciate it. I appreciate it a lot.
Yeah.
It was Jack Fresco, right? That's the guy you mentioned.
Yes.
I was shared some of his work, and some of his work is for free. It's available for free online. And I found him reminding me of myself in certain ways, but with clear distinctions. There's an anti-accomplishment and anti-ambition communistic or socialistic sort of framework that a lot of people come from, that I think is mistaking sort of making moral errors and betraying people and lying to people and these other moral crimes with success itself. Because some people find success through evil ends. Not everyone does. Many people find success through straightforward ends, and maybe even in the majority of cases, people that are providing real value. Like the people that have messed up our food supply, in some sense, were trying to do so to feed people. Now, you could say they manipulated things to certain ends, but certain aspects of it were just scientific advancements trying to feed people more, like nitrogen infusion into soil and stuff like that. And there's just ways of dialing it in that will make it moral once again, rather than off the track. But I don't have, and it's because of the way I was raised. I came from a Republican, mostly household, and just always respected people that were successful on a certain level, just for their competence. That I never had that. I never had that sort of anti-success bent. That flavor never really tasted good in my mouth. I get. Go ahead.
Well, I don't think I definitely wouldn't classify it as he's and that's just my opinion. From my understanding of his work, I don't think he's against success. What I think is that the way that we measure it. So, all right, if you make an impact, you want to be rewarded for your impact, right? That you make. I think there are different ways to actually get that reward and get that celebration. So I do think, like the project he laid out, the Venus Project, we're definitely a few decades away from that. But in my opinion, as far as providing like a base standard of living, I don't think that would be difficult. And I think the impact, and if we had that across the board, it would allow people to be more impactful, because you aren't actually, like, when you're thinking hand to mouth and you're stressed out about your bills, like science is showing your IQ is lower. Like you're not thinking as clearly, you're not figuring stuff out the same way. And you can still get rewarded for your success by being celebrated, in different ways. And the only reason why we're celebrated, well, I would say, because we've had scarcity through all humanity, accumulation, self-accumulation has been celebrated, because it means that you and your family are going to be able to live forever. And the closer you get to those people who've accumulated a lot, the more likely you are to benefit from that, in one way or another, whether that means becoming their friend and then getting a business deal, or what have you. But like, say for example, so I come from a unique situation. I was adopted, right? I've been given, advantages because of my adoption that I would not have had if I wasn't adopted. So would my life have turned out, like the same way if I wasn't adopted? There's no way to know. Like, I might have been more
Well, you could be
successful.
guaranteed that it would be different.
Yeah, I can be guaranteed it will be different. I might have been more successful than I am today, or I might have been less successful. But the circumstances of my biological parents were that they were in poverty in Jamaica, and my adopted family was like a upper middle class family in Turks and Caicos. And I'm one of the few people in the world in America, who has no college debt. Like, I was able to go to school and come out without any college debt, so I have advantages like over a lot of people in this world. So, I think all that,
Not
but I didn't
not to
do
be
anything.
not to be nitpicky, but
Yeah,
this ties all in together. I would use the language instead of advantages and disadvantages in the binary. I would say blessings. You have
bless.
many blessings that maybe some other people don't have,
Hmm.
but it's definitely something to be grateful for, and
Hmm.
it's very good. With Jack Fresco and with this sort of broader debate, basically here's the distinction that I see. We have the same vision of the future, but we
Hmm.
have different presuppositions that brought us to envisioning that future. And when philosophically you have the wrong presuppositions, the wrong preset assumptions, the average person that isn't highly intellectual and pursuing truth and
Hmm.
capable of sorting through the nuances, they will go off track.
Hmm.
The evils of government in the 20th century was just repeated examples of people philosophically going off of the track, typically going away from truth, and then ignoring evil to the point where, the phrase, all it requires for evil to succeed in the world is for good men to do nothing.
Yep. So.
If we're not actively, those of us who are truly aligned to the good, if we're not in the fight, if we're leaving the fight for someone else, if we're deferring responsibility,
Hmm.
we're to blame through negligence. And
Very
that's
true.
something that's really annoyed me with people that are in a position to make an impact, even like a Joe Rogan or a Jordan Peterson or many other people that I think should be in the game on the field and decide to stay on the sidelines for typically cowardice or just selfish reasons that sometimes make sense. But this is the ultimate fight for me. And so maybe it's to motivate myself. Maybe it's just because I truly believe it. But I definitely have a bit of judgment in that particular aspect. But
So I have a question. You said something that piqued my interest just now. So you said you think that people like Joe Rogan and Jordan Peterson should be in the fight. So what, if Joe Rogan was sitting down with you right now, what would you ask him to do that he's not doing right now? What do you think he should be doing?
um, keep having political guests on.
Hmm.
He's in a
Professor.
unique position to be an everyday man who can speak to a former president, who can speak
Hmm.
to congressmen and senators and all this, and be taking his great talent for insightful and illuminating conversation and take
Hmm.
it into the political realm. He specifically avoided educating and focusing on the political realm for a very long time. And one of the things that makes me slightly different and a little off from the average person is that I couldn't. Once I was given the responsibility of having to vote and having to figure out who to vote for, even though I had a panic attack and had to take 18 months off, and I've had to take various breaks as I've learned more and more about politics,
Hmm.
yeah, I just had to keep going back to it. I couldn't sit around and watch and just try to put the blinders on. I believe that truth is central to being, and so I couldn't let it go. And then, yeah, so with Joe Rogan, it would be to do what he's good at, what his talents. He shouldn't be a governor. He shouldn't be a president. He shouldn't run for office, but he should be trying to do his best to illuminate the people that are doing good work in that sphere and then leverage his specific talents and his individual abilities.
You,
Jordan Peterson should run for office. Just
okay.
just facts. He's leaving that position of Canadian Prime Minister up to Trudeau by definition of not running. He's got the exposure, he's got the talent, and every reason he's ever given has either been wrong
Mhm.
or fundamentally cowardice. He said, I don't like confrontation. Well, too bad. When the Nazis show up and shoot your children in front of you,
It's
sorry,
confrontation.
confrontation shows up.
Yep, yep,
And then the
yep.
other one is it would take a lot of work, which, I mean, come on, man. He's got an IQ of 100 bazillion, and
Yeah.
like,
And
you know, he could be doing the work.
it's
That's
so
what I would tell
sad.
those two
It's
people.
so sad to see what's happened to Canada because, you know, I haven't been to Canada. I went to Canada twice in my life, but I haven't been there, you know, like for an extended period of time. Obviously, it was just like for 2 quick vacations. But I actually had one of the best vacations of my life, you know, like over in Canada. You know, it's a really beautiful country, really nice people. Canadians are genuinely nice, friendly people. And to see how, you know, Trudeau has treated, you know, the Canadian citizens, and like how, you know, how they all kind of fell in line, you know, like, or a lot of them fell in line, I should say, as, you know, that was going on. It was truly a sad sight, you know, like to see what happened over there. So, but
Yeah,
Canada's been,
especially with the treatment of the truckers' protests and the way that all went down, and the language he chose to use, Nazi, terrorist, all that. It's
absolutely baseless. And, you
despicable.
know, that's one of the worst things in the world when you throw terms like that around there loosely, because what it does is it removes the meaning of those words. So when people are actually doing those things and you say those words, it doesn't mean the same thing anymore. And people don't take it seriously, you know, like, as people do it. So, yeah,
That's
that was really
there's
sad to see that
I
happen.
believe this is a fundamental part of reality. Those who are fully dedicated to honesty and the truth can
Hmm.
create truth through their speech, and the
Hmm.
opposite is true. Those who choose to deal in lies and deception weaken and fragment the truth and create this fog of confusion that
Well, the
hurts lots of people.
the best lies have a significant amount of truth woven into them, because they use things that are true, and then they come to deliberately incorrect conclusions. And, you know, I don't know, you know, like, and the example I use, so hopefully I'm not gonna offend you with this comparison, but there's a lot of people out there who believe in flat earth right now, right? And when you go look at the YouTube video, because I wanted to see, why is it that, you know, a lot of people believe this again now. So I went to go look at some of the videos, and what I found was the video, like one of the videos I found, it said so much stuff that was true. It said the government's corrupt. Politicians are lying to you. The media is working with the government. You know, religion is leading you down the wrong path, and the earth is flat. So, like, I'm summarizing, but it's like they
Yeah,
took you down all these things you agree with. And you're like, yeah, all that makes sense. All that makes sense. And, you know, they go to the Bible, they throw like little parts out of here, there, and they come to their own conclusions. And then, yeah, you know, like they do it
yeah.
like that. So, in my
And you,
opinion, you know, the best lies have a lot of truth woven into them. So,
I learned that lesson through many people in my life, including, and I don't want to offend, I don't want to offend
yeah,
anybody now,
yeah.
but my experience with Barack Obama as president
Mm-hmm.
was repeatedly that he could speak to your soul and the
Mm-hmm.
emotions and the moment and where we're at, and to so many collective truths. And then right at the strategic moment, he'll pervert things and sneak it in there and take it the
Mm-hmm.
direction he wants. And
Mm-hmm.
he's one of the highest level players in that regard. And it made me understand that you can have, you know, speech as sweet as honey
Mm-hmm.
and still fundamentally not be the real deal, and it's all, you know, if anything it's worse because you really play to people's emotions and and,
Exactly.
and, and compassion. um so yeah, that's definitely something that happens a lot. People that leverage the truth the
Mm-hmm.
95% of the way so that they can get you on that 5%.
Exactly.
And it takes someone with integrity to make sure they don't ever do that. So
Hmm.
um,
I
yeah,
agree.
absolutely. Now we'll bring this all a little bit full circle. One thing you commented on earlier, I'm just going to throw this out there. I think humans are inherently self-propagating, because I think that's just the genetic imperative, the sort of
Hmm.
nature of the universe, that we're all wanting to or self-propagating and wanting to just expand ourselves.
So I think the reason that we all believe that is because we've lived in a world of scarcity, you know, all of our lives. So I think, you know, in my opinion, the way I would say I differ from Jack Fresco's opinion just a little bit is I would say the basics for human life should be covered, and then after the basics for human life are covered, then I think there's room for us to, because I don't think money's going away like right this
No,
second. I think,
it's
it's,
technology.
yeah. I think it's a little bit. I think it's necessary in the world we live in. But you know, one thing I like to point out, right? I've actually, like with my background in economics, one thing I noticed is that in America, a lot of people are told that the low taxes equates to more social mobility, and that it's easier to, bring yourself up from the bottom over here in America than it is in other countries in Europe where they do have, higher taxes. But if you actually look at the correlation between father-son earnings, in different developed countries in the world, one thing you're going to realize is there's actually more social mobility in places like France, the UK, and a few of those other European countries than there is in America. So if you're born to rich parents or poor parents in America, you're actually more likely to stay in that same tax bracket than you are in some of those other countries. But the caveat being, when you are able to break out of that, the top does tend to be a little bit higher, for people in America than it is in those countries. So I'm not going to deny that. But one thing I can say is that if, I actually, was blessed to spend a month over in the UK, like a few weeks ago, because my brother lives over there. So I kind of just stayed with him and worked remotely
Nice.
over there. And just my opinion, it wasn't just like I was there for a few days or a week. Like I was there for an entire month. In general, people are a little bit friendlier, like, and nicer, just as you're interacting with them, like randomly over there, because median wealth is actually higher in all of those countries I just named than it is in America. Like median wealth in America doesn't even crack the top 10 when it comes to median wealth. Most
Yeah.
people in
Where
this
the true average Joe is.
Exactly. Most people in this country are living paycheck to paycheck. I'm sure you've seen the numbers about like how close the average American is to bankruptcy. Like a lot of people
Yeah,
don't,
a $400 emergency away from bankruptcy. Yeah,
it's
most of
not
us are.
it's not like that in other countries. And I think, a big part of that reason is they do have a little bit more of a safety net, like over there for people at the bottom. And the way the education system is funded, like in this country, is actually one of the most tragic parts of America, in my opinion, because they use property taxes to fund schools. So if
Yeah,
you're born into a neighborhood that is poor, then you're going to have a worse school. And
yeah,
I used to work for a nonprofit, actually. I know I mentioned at the beginning that my experiences in finance and nonprofits. And one of the things I found was when you actually dive into the numbers, even after you account, for poverty level, one thing a lot of people don't realize is um, there is actually less funding going to, when you look at the actual numbers of the national average, there is actually less funding going to poor black schools and like traditionally black neighborhoods than there is going to poor white schools. And then the way those funds are allocated in black neighborhoods is it goes into, a lot of that goes into sports. So, and if you look at the amount of people who are ever going to make money in sports, you're talking about a minute number of those people. So
it's a high risk, low success rate.
exactly.
Yeah, endeavor, and even if you say you made a lot of money in the NFL and you have brain damage at the end of it, what life do you have on the other side of that? Yeah, again, material success is not everything, and the value of human endeavors is not just monetary. It's also spiritual, social, and so yeah, there's a lot of other angles to take on that. And I have the same criticisms of our education system. I see it as a functional piece of systemic racism as it exists today. After the Civil Rights Act in the United States, that system had to switch from overt Jim Crow laws
Exactly.
and slavery to
To
covert through secondary mechanisms. Mostly, if a demographic is particularly poor and you create anti-poor policies, you then have de facto emergent systemic racism against that demographic. So that's absolutely a piece of it, and a piece of it that the American left can't keep getting on their knees to worship. You know, they just say more money, more money, more money. That just, when you have it where you have that spread of investment, it just exaggerates that spread. Whereas, so that's why I support a voucher system or just leveling of the investment, to say that we need to make sure every kid is getting that base level of investment. And so, sort of getting to the presuppositions versus the vision thing I talked about earlier, I believe that being a productive human being is a good thing, and being a lazy bum is a bad thing.
Exactly. Agreed.
Always.
100%.
All of these taking care of base needs for people policies to me, should be implemented so that we can be more productive and so that we can do more, not because we should all be able to have this leisure time and because work is this hard thing. You know, it should be, you know, the Singapore model where they have free housing for 80% of the population. It makes it so that every dollar you earn productively goes more into investment and consumption and all the things that create growth in the system.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because Singapore does actually have their rise from poverty is unique. You know, there's no other country in the world that did it as quickly as they did. Like, they were literally one of the poorest countries in the world when they gained their independence from the British back in the early 1960s. And what they did was they focused primarily on education and primarily on minimizing corruption. And I actually have Lee Kuan Yew's book, who was their president, you know, like for a very long time. And he describes in his book how the CIA tried to bribe him to, you know, like get him to do something that might not have been so beneficial for the country. And, you know, he turned it down and he did his own thing. Now, I guess you could say one of the differences is that because Singapore doesn't have like any resources, they probably just kind of like tried once, saw he wasn't about, whatever, you know. Like,
there's no oil wars in Singapore.
Exactly. There's no oil. There's no gold. There's none of that stuff over there. It's like, whatever. Let them figure it out. But if it was a different situation, the attention might have been, you know, like a little bit different. But yeah, you know, the way they did it was they incentivized people to save. They gave people a reason to save. They matched their efforts, and they kind of created programs that, you know, made them do it to an extent. So I think there's a lot that can be learned from the Singapore model, but they just got to relax our policy on weed, man. You can't, you know.
There's nobody's perfect. Nobody's perfect.
No one's perfect.
And that's where freedom more than success has to be a priority, because it is about us not using force. And I want to hop into lobbying after this to get a bit more on your background and your experiences there. But I'm going to jump around a little bit. But part of the way America creates the productivity that can then, it's about extracting the value from people, not being productive in and of itself so that people can be wealthier, is high cost of living. By keeping cost of living high and making sure that you keep going through the rat race and you never get anywhere. College debt is another one of the angles that they take on it. The point is to keep you from being able to go beyond the 9-to-5 job, even though in the long run, like if you allowed, you know, if cost of living was cheap and incomes were still at the same level that they are, and people could retire and invest and get to that capitalist, to use the Marxist phrase, the Marxist conception of it, the capitalist tier of society, that would unlock a huge amount of intellectual potential and the vision for the future. And then we can bring in immigrants to fill in those 9-to-5 to keep churning that system up and bringing people up above that threshold. So it's again, it's if you have the right vision and the right reasons that you could really do something, but they fundamentally are not about that. They're about control, about power, about extracting value.
You
And
know, it's funny you brought that up, right? Because one of the things I noticed when I was over there, like in the UK. So, number one, for the most part, you don't need a car. Like you can get around using their public transport system. So, the cost of living is going to be lower over there if you're not paying a car note, if you're not paying insurance and all this other stuff. But my brother, who does have a car, I asked him how much he pays for insurance over there. He pays about, what is it? He said like 400 pounds, which is like about $550 around a year for his car insurance
oh
over there.
wow,
A
I thought you were
year,
going to say
not
a
a
month.
month, a year for his car insurance over there. His phone bill is about 25 pounds per month. He doesn't have to pay for health insurance because they do have like a public health like
The
insurance system
National
over
Health
there,
Service, yeah.
the national health system over there. And he also was able to, because he did come from a more challenging circumstance. He was able to take advantage of a program they have over there that turned him into a property owner, and he's really been able to like lift himself up from the position he was in using some of those programs. And when I was over there, the amount I spent on groceries was actually about, I want to say, like a half of what I'm spending over here. And the amount of chemicals and pesticides that they have in their, like, their regular food over there is our organic food over here. Their
Yeah.
organic food over there is like nothing's on it. So
Yeah, it's
so
like
it's like,
five-star restaurant, like yeah, top of the line stuff. Yeah, the
exactly.
food discussion as a whole and the way Europe does it generally versus us, that's a place where we really I'm not the kind of person to just sit there and worship the Europeans because I, look
Mhm.
at the 20th century and just say they made some mistakes. You know, I don't want to
Yeah, yeah,
model the whole European deal. I don't want to take every little bit of it, but there's certain
yeah.
things they do that are just right. The way the French handle their water system is
Mhm.
another example. But again, generally in that area, their food, the way in which they try to remove all these poisons from their system to make sure people are healthier and
Mhm.
sort of getting to the where you talked about the scarcity mindset, and that I want to touch on that. I'm all about the abundance mindset and bringing forth the future of abundance rather than scarcity mindset in the current state of scarcity that we have, because humans are the only commodity, to use that language,
Mhm.
where scarcity and abundance are reversed, where the more humans, the more value in humanity, not the less
Yeah.
humans, the more value. Everything else
Very
is
good
scarcity
point.
equals value.
Very
And
good
and
point.
that's
I
where
never thought
labor is
about
the
that.
same. Labor is the same deal. Where the this is getting into the economics a little bit, but your the demand for jobs and productivity
Hmm.
creates a demand for labor. So it's like productivity creates demand, and then the supply, the supply relationship and everything that with labor is a little bit different. It's the number of people, and
Hmm.
it's inverted relative to all other commodities. And so we should have a unique set of rules for humanity. And I believe that healthcare is just to round on this point, and then I want to get into the lobbying stuff.
Hmm.
Healthcare is more valuable than every other industry in that human lives are in the balance. And so if you
And
believe in lives, if you believe in human lives being inherently valuable, you have to at least concede the point that it's more important than other industries and something special has to be done about it.
yeah.
I put a priority on decentralized systems. This is sort of the central part of my unique political vision. I
Hmm.
don't say centralized government program, decentralized private markets, end of story. I say
Hmm.
decentralized government funded programs to mimic the free market to create a sort of hybrid system. And
Okay.
there's a million different reflections of how that can work, but that's the underlying principle and where I go with it. So,
Okay.
yeah. Do you have any questions for that before we get into the lobbyist stuff?
No, not really, man. But I really appreciate the way you framed that just now. And I never even thought about it like that. That humans are the only quote unquote commodity whose value goes up. Like as there's more of us. But that's a really good point right there. So,
I say some smart things every now and again.
you're a smart guy, man. You're a smart guy. So it's a great conversation so far. I'm liking where this is going, man. So
Yeah,
yeah,
it's been
yeah.
good. So, so the relationship of power and money and power, and big government and big business being in bed with each other, and
Mm-hmm.
often the same people.
Mm-hmm.
Members of Pfizer being heads of the FDA and vice
Mm-hmm.
versa. All that, and Monsanto, and you could just keep naming the companies and the back and forth there. They're often literally the same people. So thinking of them as
Monsanto
separate
just
is just
bought
another
Bayer.
part of the
Or
game.
no, sorry, Bayer just bought Monsanto. So, like that point you mentioned just now on healthcare and food, those two things, in my opinion, are completely related. They go hand in hand, and that's why. And one of the things you're seeing happen in Ukraine, I don't know if you heard about this or not, but all the farmland, that's being sold off right now is being sold to Monsanto, which now is owned by Bayer. So when you think about the ramifications of that, that now means the drug companies who make money off us being sick have the ability to engineer these food products that are going to strip the nutrients out of our food and keep us sick so they can then sell us synthetic products to keep us hooked on whatever it is they're selling. And it's not like the good food won't be available. A lot of these rich folk are buying up land, so it will be available. You just need to be a billionaire to afford it. If you're not a billionaire, you won't be able to afford the good food, but it'll be there for people who can afford it. That's the way they're taking the system right now, unfortunately, and they're trying to make people believe that the only way we can feed the world is, if we strip the food of nutrients. And I'm sorry, I don't believe that. So, like
Yeah.
I'm looking at the cost of living, and how is it that organic food is cheaper in European countries than traditional like GMO, this crap food that we have in America is over here. So whatever it is they're doing, we need to study that a little bit more and figure out the good parts of it that work and then strip out the bad parts. And that's why they're going after those farmers hard over there in Europe right now. I don't know if you've been seeing what's happening in the Netherlands, but the Netherlands is one of the biggest food exporters in the world. They're going after the farmers over there. And just like the truckers in Canada, they've bound together and they're making their voices heard, and they're disrupting they're disrupting the whole show over there. And the media, not a word about it because they don't want people to know how powerful they are. So
Yeah, it's only the independent media that is circulating that information. Luckily, for
exactly.
now, I'll put myself in there. We are strong enough to be able to keep the fight going.
Exactly.
Um, yeah, the opportunists always thrive in chaos.
Hmm.
And so if they can create chaos, then they get to buy up the land when it's nice and cheap. And
Hmm.
it's yeah, they're definitely executing at the current moment,
But
literally and figuratively.
but public consciousness is actually more aware of these problems than we ever have been before. It's just we're having trouble trying to figure out what we can do about it. And um, you know, that's why I think the biggest thing that, I think we need to make sure we keep reminding people of is the power of each individual, each one of us. And, all it really takes is one spark, like the right person said, the right thing said to the right person, and then this whole thing can change. The tide can turn just like that. Like, I don't know if you heard a few months ago, the WHO tried to do a big power grab over national governments, and they wanted to take the emergency powers away from national governments by essentially getting all the UN member countries to give their power to declare national emergencies and how to handle it to the WHO. And people weren't having it because there was enough pushback. So even though the mainstream media didn't cover it and we didn't know what was going on, that effort failed. A big part of their plan failed because there was enough pushback from the right people. So if we keep, you know, these efforts going and we keep putting solutions out there and we keep remembering that no one is going to have it 100% right, and we always have to remember we have to listen to what other people are saying, you know, take in what makes sense, and then, you know, provide constructive criticism where it doesn't, we're going to get to the right place, you know, as long as we stop censorship from shutting this down, because censorship, you know, is a big part of that. And that's why the UN just came out the other day and said, oh, you know, one of their top priorities right now is combating misinformation. But so far, every big initiative they've put together to quote unquote combat it has fallen flat on its ass. Like, you know, the government just tried to create their, what is it, disinformation board. That shit got disbanded, man. Like, you know, within
The
a
people
month.
are not for
Yeah,
it. The people are
yeah,
not
people
for
are
it.
not for it. So
Yeah, if we keep raising raising the level of awareness in the public consciousness and the collective consciousness, and there's a way of leveraging it or channeling it in the right direction towards
exactly,
solutions, we can really, really make an impact. I've made
exactly,
the criticism of certain activism when it's activism and creating awareness for problems in the absence of a workable solution. You've
exactly.
raised the temperature, but there's no dislodging of the energy. There's nowhere for it to go. So we're at such a high level of tension in society because we know the system's messed up, but we don't know where to go.
And what you just said, that's the reason why I never got involved with the BLM movement, because as much as I agreed with all the problems that they were laying out, I wasn't seeing a clear solution being presented, and like a clear ask being presented. And all the politicians that came out and put BLM, you know, like in their issues and said, yeah, we support Black people, not a single one of them spoke out about the education system and the fact that the way schools are funded in this country is kind of racist. Like, you know, it's inherently racist the way schools are funded. So you talk about the problem, you rile people up, but your solution is to take Aunt Jemima off the syrup bottles? Like what? Like, like first of all, nobody asked for that. Like, what are y'all doing right now? So
No,
yeah.
that's man. That's
Mm-hmm.
just that's a hilarious part of this whole thing.
Yeah.
Almost all of these things are literally removing people of color from things, just taking them
Yeah.
out of public view, getting
Yeah.
Aunt Jemima off of a syrup bottle or whatever. Like
And she was
it's the
based on a
opposite
real
of
person. Like she was actually like a real person who, you know, like was who did create or had a big influence in syrup. Like I read the story behind it. So now she's been erased from history to empower Black people. Like, well, people aren't
yeah.
empowered because of that.
It's yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. You know,
Waste of time. So,
that weird inverted trend and
mhm.
sequence just is repeated over and over again, which makes, you know,
Mhm.
the one thing I make sure I don't assume, and maybe it's strategic, maybe it's what he really believes, but Joe Rogan
Mhm.
often makes this point where he
Mhm.
tries to assume the best of intentions,
Mm.
and I don't.
But you know what? We
I think
need people like
your
that.
actions can be a clear reflection of your
You know
intentions.
why we need people like that? Because he wouldn't have the guests he has on his show if he didn't do that. So, and I believe that too. Even
That's
if
true.
deep down he doesn't believe that some of the people he has on his show have good intentions, he'll humor them and get them on the show. And it's a little bit frustrating sometimes because I see sometimes he'll have people on and he doesn't push back as much, you know, as I would like him to. But then I also realized if he did push back the way I would like him to, those people probably wouldn't come on the show, and then we probably wouldn't be able to hear from them, you
Yeah.
know.
If he didn't do things
So,
the way he did them, he would not have the results he has. And it's
but you know what I'm waiting on? I'm waiting the day he invites Mike Baker and Jimmy Dore onto the same show, and
oh boy, oh boy,
against each
that'll
other.
be interesting. That'll be
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah,
That'd be fun for sure.
yeah,
There, yeah, I'm a big. Ironically, I'm a big fan of both of those guys, so it'd be really interesting to see.
yeah.
I've often, I've often felt like, yeah, Mike Baker. He's still very much a. I'm going to sell you on why the system needs to stay the way that it is, basically.
Mm-hmm.
But he's one of those guys that does that 95-5 rule with the truth, where
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
all about sort of selling you on the system staying as it is a little bit, but
Yeah.
he brings a lot of really good insights and truth to the table.
Yeah.
And Jimmy Dore's sort of, he's sort of the anti-Rogan in that sense than what we just talked about, where he goes after everybody as cutthroat as he possibly can. He doesn't hold any punches. He doesn't, you know, you're his ally as long as he thinks you're on the side of the good, and as soon as he changes his mind on that, he's like
10%. Yep. Yep. And it's funny, right? Because I wouldn't have known about Jimmy Dore if it wasn't for TYT and the Young Turks. Seeing the turn they started taking as he left, I still wanted to give TYT the benefit of the doubt, and I still wanted to watch. But earlier today, before we started this podcast, because I haven't watched TYT in a long time, but before we started this podcast, I watched the interaction that Brianna Joy Gray was having with Cenk Uygur, because he was just on TYT yesterday, and it's just so sad, man, to see like what he's become. And Cenk Uygur can't speak to anybody who agrees with Jimmy Dore on something without bringing up Jimmy Dore. Like Jimmy Dore has gotten under his under his skin. Like
they are in the beefing business over there at TYT.
the
They hold a grudge like a freaking seventh grade schoolgirl, man. They hold a grudge like few others. And I honestly, where I was a fan of them. I tried to stay plugged into the general conversation as best as I can. YouTube is a great tool for that. You could just literally go on the news side, go NBC, CNN, Fox News, and see what they're saying about a subject really quickly. And then on the independent / whatever you would call TYT side, you know, you could stay plugged into the political spectrum.
Yeah.
But once they, and this might, you know, I don't know what this will make anyone think of me, but I don't care. Once they started doing the idiot Trump stuff, where their deep, incisive, and sophisticated perspective on the whole Trump phenomenon was what an idiot he is. I couldn't listen to them anymore. I'm like, there's so much more that needs to be said on that subject.
What pissed me off about that the most is the way they go after Trump voters and the way they talk about Trump voters and all that. And that's one of the things I like most about Jimmy Dore. He actually does his best to find common ground with people until he thinks that your intentions are bad. And whether or not he's right, once he thinks your intentions are bad, he's coming after you. And I'll be honest, he does seem to be on point most of the time. I can't say, you know, like he's right all the time, because, you know, nobody knows.
He's honest about why people would entertain Trump in the current political landscape. And my opinion on that is pretty much, I'm sure, in line with his. In many ways, Trump is like the least shitty shit sandwich of the whole bunch. Like, if you're just looking at all the other options that are tangible and on the table, many people, maybe even, I mean, including me to some degree, is like, who else do we got? Who else is doing remotely close to a decent job as an alternative? You know, we don't really get that. We didn't have a Bernie Trump 2016 vote. And then when Bernie lost against Hillary Clinton in the primaries, I said this on the last podcast, he, you know, basically said, well, I know I just said that she's the most corrupt and totally sold out to the top 1/10 of 1%. Vote for her. And it's like,
that was the point. That was the point. That was also the point where I lost a whole lot of confidence in Bernie, because I agree with, you know, most of his policies and a lot of the stuff he says, but, you know, and, you know, your show actually, you know, reminded me of Nico's involvement, like, in that whole situation. Like, we had the evidence that Bernie got cheated, but Bernie didn't come out and say anything. Like,
he wouldn't fight for himself or his supporters, which is where it burns people as his supporters. You know, I was a libertarian seeing Bernie as my guy, because even though on the specific policies I could disagree with them and I had different general visions and the whole capitalism subject I'm on the other side of almost entirely, he was the only good guy that I saw on the field trying to do good work by the people. And so I was perfectly willing to support him and to feel the burn. You know, I was all about him. And then when it turned that direction, I was like, sorry, bro, you can't tell me that there's this unknown dude on the other side who's a billionaire, fake billionaire, whatever you want to call him, but who's a gamble, and we don't know exactly what he's going to do. And then there's this guaranteed corrupt, you know, puppet on the other side and just say, well, puppet. Like I just could. You couldn't spend 6 months,
Yeah.
or 6 months or more in the primaries,
What he
making
would
that
have done,
message
what he would
and
have
going the
done,
other way.
I agree with Jimmy Dore 100% on this. He should have went and started his own party. Well, first of all,
Yeah.
he should have taken it all the way to the Supreme Court and, sued the DNC and participated in the actual lawsuit that was being filed against the DNC. He should have used the bully pulpit that he had at the time, shone light on what was going on, and made the national media cover it. And then if the Democratic Party still didn't get rid of some of that corruption, he should have taken all that energy off and started a new party. But
He
like
could have made
again,
the
Jimmy's right.
Democratic establishment come to their
Yeah,
knees.
yeah, that's what he should
That
have
was the
did. But
time to do it.
like he didn't do that. So
Yeah, the 2016 election was the populist election more than any of the maybe the last 40 years of elections we've had. The people were, because of the combination of the internet age and the education and the bubbling up of public consciousness and awareness, like we were ready for something different. And that's why Bernie was so successful. That's why Trump was so successful. And part of the reason why the political landscape right now or let me rephrase that. Part of the reason why my allegiances and my particular energy and support goes the way it does in the modern political situation is because the Republicans let Trump in. The Democrats cut Bernie out. And that made a giant deviation for me in which side is at least capable of bringing forth change and evolving, and which one is just dead and done. And it has to do with the age of the parties. The Democrat Party is so old; it's been around for forever. It's past its expiration date, man.
Well, I think both of them are about the same age, right? It's just, in fact, they did kind of flip around because at one point, yeah, it was during the civil rights movement. Was it the civil rights or
It was
somewhere around?
the
Maybe it was a
Civil
little
War.
before that. Yeah,
It
the
was about
Civil
the Civil
War.
War era
Yeah,
where,
yeah.
so it was the Whig Party and the Democrats and the socialists and the sort of capitalists of the late 1800s. And then it was the slavery issue that made the Whig Party die to the rebirth of the Republican Party. And the Democrats transcended that whole time frame and evolved. The Democrats are really good at evolving with the times. That's why they've survived so long. But I would like to see a revival of the Democrat Party and to see them really stand for what I believe that the everyday people believe in. But I am past the point of believing that's possible, unfortunately. I think it's anyone that even gets close to that, to success in that endeavor, tends to get cut out or choked off.
Yeah. And I saw it happen after Bernie because I was pretty excited about AOC and like a lot of the things she was saying at first, and then as soon as she got inside office, just completely flipped the script. And now, forced to vote. That's a perfect example of it. You can play clips of her talking about how important it is to get politicians on record for the bills they quote unquote say they support, to see who actually supports it, to see who really supports it and who's just talking. And then as soon as Jimmy Dore and the left came up with the idea, all right, let's make healthcare, like the frontline issue, let's force the vote on it and see what we can happen. All of a sudden, she completely forgot, that putting people on record is important to actually seeing where they lie. And since then, you haven't heard anything from her. They all go, along with the war path. And to be honest with you, I don't really think there's that much difference between the Republican Party and the Democrat Party. I wouldn't even say that the only reason why, if I had to pick right now who I would support between, say, a Republican or a Democrat for president, the only reason why I might say that I would support, a Republican at this point is because the underlying narrative in the Democratic Party right now is not to criticize anything going on with the vaccines. And if there was to happen to be another surge in COVID, like in Democratic states, like I've seen the difference in how Democratic states handle the pandemic versus Republican states. And I'm so glad that I didn't move to California, because I was really considering doing that about 2 to 3 years ago. But the insanity that's happened over there, like during this pandemic, man, I read that there was a hospital that wouldn't accept unvaccinated patients. Like, if you were unvaccinated, they wouldn't take you in the emergency room in California. And to read that and think that so many people thought this was okay, and the only reason they thought it was okay is literally Trump derangement syndrome. Like, and it's so
Healthcare
funny
is a human
because,
right unless you're unvaccinated.
yeah, like, you don't get human rights if you're unvaccinated because some
Corruptions are
unvaccinated people
evil
support.
unless it's this one.
Yeah, unless
Or
it's this one. Like,
corporations. I don't know what I said. Did I say
yeah,
corruptions are evil? That's a Freudian slip.
hear no evil, see
Corporations are
no
evil.
evil. Yeah, yeah, yeah. When it's
Yeah.
on that
Anyways,
side,
on the
and the
I
crazy.
want to touch on the AOC thing. I was never a fan, really, but
Mhm,
she's made several points that made me respect her and see that she could add to the conversation. One
mhm,
that I remember vividly is that she just highlighted that we treat Islamic terrorism and white supremacist terrorism differently in the law because of their
mhm.
international connections,
Yep.
as if white supremacy isn't transnational in the first place. That's
Mhm,
just that doesn't work on that level, but she just highlighted that there was that gap in the laws and we should fix it. And I'm like,
mhm.
yeah,
Good point.
yeah.
Yep, yep, yep,
And
yep.
that's something that just, was a good contributing part to the conversation. And then another member of the squad, real quick, is Ilhan Omar. I have
Mhm,
plenty to disagree with on what she said, but
mhm.
she's the only one that called out China for what was happening to the Uyghur Muslims. She was the
Yep.
first one and the loudest one, and I just had to give her
But
mad props for
then
that.
there's no action, like, behind
Well,
any of these words. So it's like, they say it one time and then, like, that's it. So but yeah, the social credit like system they have over there, that's like a whole nother thing. But I think there's an intentional, like, effort um to empower the Chinese government and, disempower the American government. I think the American government is on purpose trying to drive America into failure. So the Chinese government will be the most powerful government so they can export the social credit score system all over the world. But
yeah,
that's a possibility, that I think, may be happening in the long run. But yeah, not to
no,
get
I
too
agree. I
sidetracked.
agree. I think there's a intentional controlled demolition of America and our powers and our citizens that's happening right now, and
Hmm.
it sucks. It sucks that it's happening, and that's the basic fight. The West generally, but especially America as the head of the spear, tip of the
Hmm.
spear, so to speak. We need to fight for our own survival. There's a lot of people talking about the death of the West and the collapse of the West, and I am a firm believer and a participant in the fight to prevent that from happening, but it's not going to just happen. You can't ride off the momentum of history. You can't ride off of the coattails of the great people that, were born before us. We need to do the fighting ourselves.
I
I
agree.
think Reagan said, every generation has to have its fight for freedom in one
Yeah,
form or another, and we need to be up for the fight. And
yeah,
if we're not, we're going to lose it. We're going to turn into China. And I can't think of a worse hell on earth than than it being absolutely commonplace that people cannot express themselves freely and openly.
yeah,
So for
yeah,
me personally, that is my own personal hell. To think
yeah.
that everyone is lying and can't speak freely.
Exactly.
No one is a trustworthy, partner in
Yes.
conversation. It's just not about that. All right.
Exactly.
Well, this has been an amazing conversation. I have no
Yeah.
complaints whatsoever. But finally, without
Mhm.
further ado, what was your experience working for lobbying organizations that represented oil companies? And what were your insights that you pulled from that
Yeah.
experience?
So one of the biggest things I realized, is it really doesn't matter what letter, they have written next to their name, whether that's a D or an R. What really matters is the way they vote, like on certain bills and, on where their allegiances lie when it comes to how these companies fund people. And I didn't realize the extent of the connection between, like, I'll never forget this assignment I was given one day. They gave me an assignment as an intern to literally go research the way that all this is right as they're allocating the money that they're about to give out to all these different politicians. They asked me to go research the way different politicians voted like on a specific bill that was gonna help the oil companies. So it's like, if you support corporate welfare, which is exactly what those oil subsidies are, it's corporate welfare. If you support corporate welfare, aka giving public
Socialism for the
money,
rich.
yeah, giving public money to the richest companies in the world, then we'll donate to your campaign. Like, it doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or you're a Republican. You can get out there and say you're fighting for climate change, and like you're gonna stop the polluters from like destroying the environment. But when it comes down to the way you vote on the bills, the only difference is the people who say publicly that they're for deregulation and they're for letting oil companies do whatever it is they want. The people who say that publicly are the ones who get more money, and then the people who will say, well, yeah, like I'm for controlling them, like I want to fight, like the stuff they're doing, but we can't just turn off the subsidies. They still get something, so everyone gets a check, because it's
Yeah.
all a game of good cop, bad cop. They just take turns playing good cop, bad cop on different issues and kind of rotate it in and out. And, I'll never forget, like one of the things someone like said to me, like, like in one of the companies, because as we were researching, like as they had me do another project where I was researching the pollutants put out, like by some of these companies and all that. And I remember, saying something to her like, just looking at how much the environment, like is being polluted, like by some of these companies. Do you ever feel bad, like working for this organization? The person looked at me and told me, oh, well, we're not as bad as the tobacco companies because, they give kids cancer. They're like, they're marketing to kids. Like,
What high standards?
yeah, that's the standard. So it's like, this is the way, like they think when they're in that circle, unfortunately. So it gave me like a clear look at how corruption is legalized in America in a way that it isn't in most other countries. Like the lobbying system and the way corruption works in America, it's like, I would say America is by far the most corrupt developed country in the world. Not the most corrupt country, but by far the most corrupt developed country in the world. It's just the differences they've legalized corruption. And if you want an example of that, just look at Nancy Pelosi. Like Nancy Pelosi invests, somehow her portfolio returns are better than Warren Buffett and every other Wall Street analyst like out there. So it's like, that should be all the evidence you need of how
Yeah.
corrupt
I
like
I
like it
fundamentally
is.
agree
No?
that the D and the R really doesn't matter, and
Yeah.
especially in the modern American politics, there's the
Mhm.
corporatists and the populists.
Mhm.
There's the
Yeah.
people with the people. There's the people with the corporations, and that's the dividing line.
The,
I have a litmus test for the. Or go ahead.
if I could just add a caveat to that, because I think health, is the most important issue, and I'm a big believer in bodily autonomy, and I might be a little bit more negative than other people on this issue, but I really do think it's important to make sure we retain bodily autonomy, especially in terms of the vaccine, because of the way the Republican Party talks about it, versus the way the Democratic Party talks about it. Like,
And walk the walk. The
yeah,
laws too.
and
They
walks the
back
walk,
it up.
because I live in Florida, and I disagree with Ron DeSantis on certain issues, but when it comes to protecting bodily autonomy, the man has been on point. Like I
Yeah.
wish he would have spoke a little bit more about some of the dangers, but what he has done is he's defended people's ability to make their own decisions about their body, and I don't see any of that like in the Democratic Party at this point. And I can't see myself supporting them until they're willing to have that conversation publicly. And they're willing to say, okay, not just the vaccines aren't effective anymore, but the way we handled that situation was wrong. And you are seeing the tone start to change a little bit now, because now that the CDC has come out and said, okay, the same policy we just called Ron DeSantis crazy for, we're going to implement all over the country and let everyone make their own decisions. Like, they still aren't saying what they did wrong before. They're
Yeah.
just saying, oh, well, moving forward, because the situation is a little bit different now, like, we can all
Yeah.
adopt
And
Florida's policy.
I honestly, unfortunately, I have no respect for people that only are willing to open their minds and think a certain thought once they're given permission to. So, like the lab leak theory from the Wuhan lab of virology, until Bill Maher said it on his show, or not Bill Maher, until Jimmy Stewart or Jim Stewart.
It was
Stewart?
no, it
Jeez,
was what's his name?
the
John
Daily Show
Stewart.
guy.
John Stewart went
John
on the
Stewart, yeah.
he went on the
Jimmy.
Colbert show.
Jimmy Dore was in my head. Anyways,
Yeah,
but yeah, until he made the joke about it,
yeah.
they wouldn't engage in the conversation. It was a conspiracy theory. And I'm like, if you only are willing to open your mind up once that happens, I don't care about freaking talking to you, man. You're not even there. You're not a real person. You're just going with whatever you believe you're allowed to think. I can't respect it. I wanted to make a point about I believe that there's a litmus test, and it's not a perfect science, but there's a litmus test for the dinos and the rhinos, the Democrats in name only and the Republicans in name only. When they say that behind closed doors they're actually really close friends with the other side, that is a huge red flag for me, because that tells me, like, so you think, if you're a Republican, so you think they support killing babies in the womb, but you guys are friends behind closed doors? Or on the other side of it, you believe that that they are trying to control women's bodies, but you're secretly friends with them behind closed doors? Done.
Yeah, it shows that you don't really.
That
Well, I
tells me
guess
it's a game.
the only caveat I can say is I do think it's important to respect differences, in opinion, and to be cordial with people who you disagree with. So, well,
I agree
depending
with
on what
that.
that disagreement, like, is rooted on. If someone is knowingly guilty, like, of serious crimes, then that's something
Yeah.
different. But
Yeah, and if
yeah,
we know there's dinos, we know there's rhinos, and so that's just one of my tests for trying to sort them out from the
yeah,
general
yeah,
population. But yeah, I really do believe we just have a corporatist party and a populist party, but the populist wings are kept apart by the Democratic Republican narratives,
yeah,
where you basically assume the other side is either evil or stupid or both.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so you just don't think that it's a conversation worth engaging in. Whereas the truth is, the 70 or 80% of us in the middle, and the personality science backs this up, the 70 or 80% of us in the middle have the same basic reasonable sensibilities. We're willing to engage the two sides of the discussion. We're
Yeah,
willing to
yeah,
see that, for example, that voter suppression is a problem and voter security is a problem, and they're not
exactly,
actually the same thing. That's a
exactly.
great example where most people agree voting should be secure, and most
hmm
people believe that voters should have the full, comfortable ability to get there and to vote, with it being secure.
I'm so glad you mentioned that because before the whole, big debate between January 6th and Trump, losing or winning the elections or whatever have you, I actually was following the story of what happened to Tim Canova over in Florida, who ran against Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Have you ever heard of Tim Canova before?
I have not.
So imagine this. Tim Canova ran against Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who was the person who was running the DNC at the time they cheated Bernie out of that top spot. And he ran against her in her district, right? The first time he ran against her, he nearly beat her. But there was a lot of irregularities. I actually held a conversation with him on my podcast. I'll send it to you, after we, get off the live. And he held he came close to beating her the first time. And then the next time he ran against her, imagine this. He was capped at exactly 5% across every demographic in the election. So he got 5% of the black vote, 5% of the white vote, and 5% of the Hispanic vote when
That's
he
a
was
red
running.
flag factory.
Exactly.
That's why they
So
make the red flags, bro.
yeah, it's like, how the
Yeah.
hell can anybody look at this shit and take the election seriously? Like, the chances of that happening is like less than lightning striking the exact same spot on the ground every single day for like a century in a row or something ridiculous like that.
Yeah.
Like, the chance of that happening is so ridiculous. And yet there was no mainstream media coverage about it. Nobody spoke about it. And seeing, number one, how they cheated Bernie, and then number two, how they capped this man who nearly beat Debbie Wasserman Schultz, like at that specific amount, and then they never like put any attention on it. It was, I realized that you can't really trust like elections at all. So I don't know if Trump won or lost the election. You know, like my hunch is he might have won, but I don't know for sure. You know, like, I can't say one way or another. Do I? But what I can say for sure is I don't trust like the elections
Yeah.
at all, and that's another one of the reasons why I definitely want to encourage you and your viewers to check out this book, Blockchain Revolution, because um, you know, one thing people are, you know, rightly afraid or rightly concerned about is digital identity. However, the problem with digital identity is if it's stored on a centralized server, so the data can be manipulated and we don't know what's going on with it and who has access to it. So what blockchain does is it allows permissioned access to, what do you call it, different sets of data, and it stores the data on decentralized servers spread out across the world. So if we had decentralized digital identity, so it wasn't all stored at the Federal Reserve or on Hillary Clinton's, you know, like computer, you know, like in the back of her basement or whatever. If it was decentralized and still protected our privacy, what we could have is a voting system that shows in real time how everyone is voting, what everyone is voting for. And they have a pretty similar system to what I'm describing in Estonia right now, except it's not technically a blockchain. You know, it's a distributed ledger. But you know, I'm not like an IT expert, so I can't tell you all the exact differences, but it's pretty close. But you know, point of the matter being, we would see in real time our vote, and we would know that our vote is being counted properly. You know, like in the elections, and you know, we can see what's happening in real time. So we don't need to wait on, you know, these mail-in ballots, you know, that may or may not, you know, include dead people on the signatures or whatever. We can see who's voting, you know, how the results are coming in, and we can watch it all happen in real time. So I think decentralized identity actually solves a lot of these problems. And what it also empowers is um, like micropayments in a different way that could even empower independent journalists. So one of the things you and I spoke about is trying to figure out not just journalists but creators overall. So um, essentially, you know, one of the things this book you know, talks about is how, you know, we could do it more efficiently on a pay-as-you-go basis. So what blockchain does is it cuts out the middleman and the transaction cost of a lot of these services that are currently very expensive to do. So the reason why, you know, banking is expensive, and you know, the way they make their money is by ensuring, you know, the contracts are enforced. The distributed ledger automates that process. It leaves it down to the code so we can trust it, and it lowers the cost of it greatly. So it's more transparent, but it still protects privacy because of the pseudonymous nature, you know, of these wallets. Like right now, blockchain, Bitcoin is on a public ledger. I can go and look at all the Bitcoin transactions to see what wallet sent money where, but what I don't know is who owns what wallet. And you can set it up in a way where what do you call it? You know, like that you change your wallet number or whatever, or the money you receive gets distributed to different wallets. There are ways to randomize it to protect your privacy while still ensuring there is a traceable record for people who should have access to it. Like if you're in a less corrupt version of the FBI and you have to investigate, you know, like some drug crimes that may have been facilitated using Bitcoin, it's actually easier for them to do it because they're able to get warrants and then, you know, see who put money into the exchange and who pulled the money out of it. But you or I wouldn't have access to that same information. But
Yeah.
long story short, the micropayments that it empowers, it makes it easier to pay for things to do things on a pay-as-you-go basis. So if I'm reading an article from an independent journalist, I don't have to pay a media outlet to manage this, a media outlet to collect the money, and then for all the other services they provide, I can send that money straight to the person who's reading the article, and I only pay based on how I use it and how much of it I use. So if I read an article that's written by like Jordan Farmar, and Jordan Farmar's article is, you know, 10 pages long, and I read all 10 pages, I might pay 10 cents for that article. But if someone else reads it and, you know, they're bleeding heart, you know, blue haired liberal, and they disagree with you as soon as you said, you know, we should have free speech, and they only get one page into it, that person pays a cent, you
Hmm.
know, like for that article, whereas I pay 10 cents because I've used it more. And when you take that same concept and you apply it to music creators, you know, you have different people who are going to be using music for different purposes. Like me, who's listening to music, you know, like on my like phone when I'm in the gym, I'm listening to a song, I might pay 1 cent to, you know, listen to a 3 second song. But if that same song was going to be used as an intro to a YouTube channel that's making money, you know, like off using this song, I might charge that YouTube channel $10 for using it. If it's going to be used in a movie, you know, these are all different types of access. So depending on what you're using it for, you'd have a different kind of wallet. You'd be accessing it for a different purpose, and the fees are adjusted accordingly. So decentralized identity is really the key to making this system work.
My phone's close to dying.